Hey y'all, it's Maritime in America again, a podcast where we're charting America's offshore stories. It's the only podcast that highlights mariners' perspectives on issues facing the offshore community and the greater U.S. maritime community. I'm your host, Aaron Smith of the Offshore Marine Service Association. Each Friday, I'll bring you the Offshore Briefing, a quick rundown of the week's notable developments, updates, and news you need to know in the offshore space. In addition, we'll feature a special guest from the maritime world, bringing a mariner's voice and real-world perspectives straight to the show. Joining me are my co-hosts, Ashley and Angelle, where we'll strengthen the maritime American mariner's voice by diving into the people, policies, and powerful currents shaping the U.S. maritime community. Whether you're on deck or at your desk, we're glad you're here. All right, welcome everyone to Maritime in America. We are coming up with another great interview. I'm really excited about it today. As always, I am your host, Aaron Smith, and with me I have my co-host, Angelle Johnson and Ashley Smith. How are y'all doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. So today we are going to have our guest, Jeremy Bailey, who is with SPOC Grid Inverters. He's a great OMS member. Jeremy, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Glad to be on.
Well, good. Well, it's so good to have you. And I'll have you introduce yourself here in a second, but let me just say, like, the stuff that Jeremy comes up with in the amazing technology that he knows and the information that is in his head is so crazy. He's an asset to our industry, and I'm so glad to have him on and to show that it's not that this industry provides such great careers and takes advantage of such great American skill sets. And that's not just on the maritime side. There's a whole nother world that I want to explore today with Jeremy that this industry provides for. And I think it's just a great asset. So Jeremy, introduce yourself to everyone here.
Before you do that, Jeremy, I just want to let everyone know that I can't help but tease you and make fun of you. So I apologize to anyone listening if it sounds like I am bullying him. He's used to it.
No, that's fine. I'm definitely used to it. So
I would also say he's going to give as good as he's going to
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only because he bullies me too.
I'm not worried at all about that.
It goes both ways. Oh, yeah, and it's all in good fun as well. So just a quick introduction, Jeremy Bailey. As you mentioned, I work for SPOC Grid. I've been there for just over a year. July was a year. SPOC's a small family-owned company that's in the electrical drives business, right? Started in the land-based drilling, pumping applications, right? And has grown into other industries, marine being one of them. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. They're also in some other land-based applications, rental hybrid generators, as well as starting to see a big push in the data center space. So prior to joining SPOC, I spent 12 years at GE Power Conversion, had various different roles there. When I left, I was running the merchant and offshore business for the Americas, and I had roles from field service commissioning engineer all the way up through running the P&L for the western side of the world. So a lot of various roles, and technical and commercial, and as well as site and office based. Prior to that, I spent almost 4 years at L3 Communications in a specific unit that was the integrator for the Marine Power Systems group. So we did a couple of large medium voltage projects. We did a chemical product taker over at BAE in Mobile, or Atlantic Marine, Alabama Shipyard, whatever it happened to be called at the time. It changes names quite frequently. And we did a big radar vessel for MSC down at Halter in Pascagoula. So did that, and prior to that, I worked at Bender Shipbuilding, which is kind of where I started my marine career. When I left Bender, obviously electrical test and trials foreman, made it to the end when Bender finally went out of business after some of his business dealings caught up with him, we'll say. And but I learned a lot there, worked through testing trials, did a lot of installation controls, installation testing. So really got my feet wet in the marine industry at Bender. And prior to that, I was a commercial industrial electrician.
I did not know that about Bender.
Yeah.
How did we not connect that, Aaron?
I
You
don't
connect
know.
it to me.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Yeah, Ashley has some ties to that, some of which
my roommate.
Even know what a wharf is versus a dock,
Yes. We constantly battle over that.
Yes. But I think it's interesting that the maritime industry folks, most of them, at least in our segment of the maritime industry, will understand what an electrical expert is doing on board a vessel. But I think some of our other listeners, maybe some of the public policy folks that listen to our podcast, or some of the other folks, they'll be, so you make the lights on the vessel work, they won't understand. So explain why you are so employable and you are in such demand as an electrical expert on board a vessel.
Yep. So I'll start with how ships are built, and I'll compare that to, say, an automobile, right? Most people know, main components of a car. So if you were going to go build a custom car today, and let's say you wanted to go put a Ferrari engine in the car, and you wanted a Lamborghini transmission, you wanted the interior of a Mercedes, and you wanted the
Why do I feel
styling.
you've tried this?
Yeah, I've not, but I have explained this to people who didn't know anything that I was talking about on the ships, right? No. So if you wanted to go make that car today, right? Well, first is there's nobody that does that, right? If you want a car, you go buy a car from whoever you buy that car from. Ships aren't that way. Ships are custom built in almost all applications, and you go and buy various bits and pieces from various different manufacturers. And then they all turn up at a shipyard and get put together, tied together, and away you go. Except for it's not that easy, right? If you took that car example, you could go buy a Ferrari engine, you could go buy the bits and pieces and try to put them together, and there's 100% chance it would not work. Mhm. And so in the marine side, it's the exact same way. Right? There's 100% chance it won't work unless you integrate it, right? So that's what I do, and that's what others in similar roles is. You have to understand the engines, the generators, electrical drives, motors, the switchgear, all the different systems. Now we start seeing more batteries and hybrid technology. So you have to understand how each one of those systems ties into the bigger system to make the ship work.
Mhm.
That's the value out. If it was as simple as buying all the bits and pieces and putting them on the ship, the shipyard would do it, and I wouldn't have a job.
Well, and that is fascinating, and how many of these things do come together. And you're not just talking also about one engine or one thruster. You're talking about at least 4 engines,
Minimum
and then
4.
and then I think, again, I don't think people understand then what's in front of that engine and between that engine and those primary drives or those primary movers, and that's that you have an electrical generator there too.
Yeah.
So talk about how those things interface, because Ashley, I know I've walked you through an engine room before, but I don't think you realize that these are electrically powered vessels.
No. And also, I was probably running out because it was so loud and giving me a headache.
Yep. So your typical, we'll say, a diesel electric propulsion vessel, right? You will have typically diesel engines as your prime mover. So typical, you put diesel in, they spin a shaft. That shaft's connected to a coupling that couples to an electrical generator, an alternator. So that then makes electricity. Right? So from that point, you've converted mechanical energy into electrical energy. And electricity will go into switchboards where you can then distribute it throughout the ship and switch it and transform it downstream to different voltage levels through transformers. And you can send it to your propulsion thrusters or main propulsion motors. And then typically today you'll run those through VFDs, so variable frequency drives, that allows you to control the speed and, depending on the type of application, the direction of the thrust as well. And then at that point you get to the propulsion motor or the thruster motor. That motor is then the inverse of the generator. So it has a shaft that spins, it couples back to something that's mechanical, the thruster or a propeller, that then turns it back into mechanical energy, spinning a propeller through the water that provides the thrust.
That is just so cool. And there's so many parts to it. And again, we're not talking about a system. You're talking about, 4 main engines through an equal, if not more, number of generators, and then going through to at least 2 prime movers plus however many auxiliary thrusters you have on board. That's cool. And it's just something that people don't think about, and they think it's just one motor connected to one propeller. No, it's not. And maybe it is in other segments of the shipping market and the maritime industry. That's
Yeah,
those are,
you see that on a lot of the big merchant vessels, like
yeah,
container ships. A lot of time it's one large engine, a shaft, a single propeller, and a rudder. But they also just, transit open ocean, drive mostly in a straight line, and go from point A to
yeah,
point B. That's not what
yeah.
our industry
That's
does.
dumb maritime. That's kids play. We like the
So,
interesting stuff here.
side note, Jeremy, did you enjoy physics when you were in grade school?
I did.
Yeah, but I want to know. Well, I want to explore that more because you have such a great wealth of knowledge in this area. Where does that come from? Where
Yeah.
exactly when did you take apart your parents' television?
So, I've always been curious by nature, right? So I'm always fascinated by different things, technologies. Wasn't taking apart the television, was taking apart other things. But I think when I was younger, it was a lot of kids play Minecraft today. We played Minecraft outside. I'll tell you, I can
Yeah.
remember running around with my
Mm-hmm.
cousin. We'd have hatchet and machete. We'd chop down a tree, and then we'd start building a fort, and we would, do things like that. And just always been, generally curious about things. I think where it really started to take off, right, was, computers and the internet, because now, before that you were very limited on what information you had access to. And the internet come around, that wow, I can go on a computer and look up things, and so then that just broadened your horizon of curiosity. And then it really just amped it up when smartphones come out. Now I have the internet in my pocket at all times. And it's getting even worse with AI these days. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's an interesting, I've worked in a few different sectors. I've worked for engineering association, I've worked for finance, and I've worked for two maritime associations. And I have to say, and I say it all the time, I genuinely and generally love the maritime sect. It's good people, it's good job, it's just all around good. But when you think about it, you just think about the boat owners or operators or the people on the boat, and you don't think about the work behind. And so, as we're doing these offshore America or maritime in America, we're like trying to highlight our industry. And I'm just so glad you're on to highlight the other side of it and all the other, like, have you always worked in this kind of role? Are there any other roles? And like, I know, and I've also noticed that people kind of stay in the industry, right? Like you may work for one company, then you go from another company. Is that just people just fall in it, or like sales, or you have to love the maritime industry? I guess just advice for people.
so when I first joined the industry, like I said, it was at vendor shipbuilding. So I
Mhm.
was on the shipbuilder side, right? And then actually the projects that we were doing at Bender were with a company. Our main integrator at the time was a company called Converteam, which GE actually ended up buying out. So
Mm-hmm.
when I finished up at Bender Shipbuilding, when everything kind of ended there for the reasons that it did, ended up going to work for L3 with actually two ex-Converteam people who had recently went over there and were recruiting people. So ended up at L3 there, but with some ex-Converteam guys. And then actually both of those guys are back at GE, right? So we all ended up going, leaving L3 and going back to going to GE, who purchased Converteam.
Well, but let's take a step back.
Mm.
How did you find Bender Shipyard? How did you get there to work?
So at the time that I found that, so I was working for a commercial industrial electrical contractor. I was actually working out at Ingalls doing a lot of the infrastructure side after Hurricane Katrina come through. So Hurricane Katrina put about 13 foot of salt water through everything at Ingalls. So we went out and replaced, every medium voltage substation and redid all the electrical, equipment in every shop and redid a lot of the machine shops and stuff there. So I was doing that. It's really hard work, right? I was running, 4-inch rigid conduit. We were, pulling lots of big cable. It was, physical, tough, strenuous work.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up hurting my back when I did that. Had my first
I
back
didn't know,
surgery working for
I
that
didn't know
company at
that.
the time. Yep. So coming back from that, still doing it, and realizing if I kept doing that, I was going to end up hurting my back again. And so one day run into some actually two guys I went to high school with. Was talking to them as we actually was cashing our paycheck on a Friday back when you'd still go to like a paycheck cashing place, because the banks were closed by the time you got off work. So
Yeah.
we're at a pawn shop cashing our paycheck, and they were talking to me about working out there, and so yeah, I'm doing electrical work as well. They said, yeah, but we just do controls. We sit in there, air conditioned space, and hook up small control wires. I'm like, ooh, what's that like?
Sign
That
me
sounds
up.
way bigger than, or way better than big pipe and large power cables that you're pulling. So talked to them, and then it was probably a few weeks went by, and had some issues at work, and was just kind of getting fed up, and called up my buddy and asked if they were still needed more people. I said, yeah, come on. I said, well, I'm getting ready to quit my job. I want to make sure it was real. He called his foreman. His foreman called him back, said, come down here, we'll interview tomorrow, you can start tomorrow. So I did.
And as I continue to say on this podcast, like, we got to stop getting lucky.
Yeah.
We can't just keep like depending upon running into high school buddies
At a pawn shop.
to find quality
Right?
individuals and industry experts at a pawn shop. Like, used guitars, stuff like that. That's a great source for that. Golf clubs, probably not industry experts. So we got to stop getting lucky here. We have to actually invest in showing people what great careers are in this industry and get them in, not just by happenstance. But, on this podcast, in addition to that soapbox, I think one of the more constant themes is Ashley calling Angelle and I nerds.
I haven't said it once. I've been like biting my lip, being like nerd alerts, but I've stopped myself.
But yeah, your industry knowledge puts us to shame.
Yes.
What is probably, without saying any names or anything, talk about like the challenge you found on a vessel that was the most fulfilling thing that you solved. Talk about that. And because I know this is going to be a good story.
So just to elaborate on it, so I get called a nerd pretty often as well, right? And I take it as a compliment, right? You look at some of the most successful people in the world today are mega nerds, right?
But here's the thing. I'm also a nerd. I nerd out big time on accounting and things like that. I just like to give Aaron Angelle a hard time.
That's I'll take our stuff over accounting. Yeah.
I like literally love reconciling the bank account. I get so excited. Like
there you go.
Well.
Yeah. Ask her about a Clevin though.
So I think, most fascinating challenges on a ship, and, I could talk about any number of them, right? But they all have kind of the same theme, is when you're trying to make all these different pieces of equipment work as the subsystems to work as the main system to make the ship work, right? And everything is constantly trying to break that, right? Whether it's the environment, whether it's, the interfaces, there's a lot of competing factors to try to make everything work. Right. And especially when you're upgrading an older vessel, right? So a new build, a lot of people, new builds are challenging enough. A major retrofit is a lot more challenging, right? Because you're fighting existing space profiles. So you're trying to put new equipment into an existing tight space, right? You have existing infrastructure you're trying to work within, right? So you're trying to either reuse cabling or piping, right? You might have issues with the overall philosophy of, how the grounding was done, right? You run into challenges with harmonics because now you're putting in VFDs into systems that didn't have them before, right? Or you may have had an older technology, so you have a new type of VFD. So, and then anytime you make a change, it affects 4 or 5 other systems, right? In a way that you didn't anticipate, or the modeling and engineering didn't expect. I spent many a times on board at 2 a.m. with a laptop plugged into a piece of equipment, chasing problems that everyone said shouldn't be there, and nobody knew how to fix them. And you just, kind of persevere and work through it. And, every ship, has its own personality, has its own unique set of challenges, right? These aren't assembly line manufactured. So even, sister ships, you go build a series of, 4 or 6 or 8 vessels. Vessel 1 and Vessel 2 are the exact same design on paper, but you walk on board, they are not the exact same ships, right? And just solving those types of problems or mysteries is so rewarding, when you get to the other side.
That's cool. And, one of the things you mentioned in there that you just kind of glossed over that I want to highlight, because it is really interesting, really is cool, is the issue of harmonics on the variable frequency drives. So explain that problem a little bit more, because I think that's one of those things no one's going to think about, but it can be a huge issue.
Yep. So harmonics are introduced into your electrical system. We'll speak in relatively simple terms.
I'm just picturing a harmonica, just FYI.
Yep.
We all knew that. We all knew that.
So when you put electrical drives or VFDs on board a ship, right? You convert alternating current power into DC power, and you use power electronic switches. So really fast, precise switches that chop up that waveform, right? And when you do that, you create noise, right? And then you smooth that back out, you convert it back to AC that you can control the voltage and frequency of that AC. So then you can control the speed and the torque of your motors, right? And that gives you a lot of benefits for efficiency and control of the application. But one of the drawbacks is it puts harmonics back into the system. So those harmonics or that noise back into the system causes, additional heating, right? You tend to cause, let's say premature degradation of equipment if it's not designed for that, right? Or if it's not adequately filtered and managed. So on a new ship, you know what you're putting in there. You design the system, you design everything for it. It's great. Retrofitting, you run into a bit more challenges because you're putting something into an existing ship, so you don't necessarily get to go redesign the whole ship.
That is so cool, and that you're able to solve these challenges is something that's great. And again, I don't think that people think about our industry as providing a career path for someone with that sort of knowledge and that sort of ability. But kind of on that then topic of career path, so you're talking about being in Bender, then Convertine, then L3, then GE, and now SPOC. You haven't just been doing the integrating and the electrical engineering. In that process, you've also become part of the sales team.
Absolutely.
And, some would say that can't happen. A salesman is a salesman is a salesman. Talk about how that happened, and then what's been part of that challenge as you've crossed into that segment of the industry.
Yep. So in terms of salesman, I like to think that I'm not a salesman, right? Sales is one of the functions that I perform, right? When most people think about a salesman, it tends to be somebody who's trying to sell me some product I don't need. That it's kind of a negative aspect. No, and ultimately, right, what I do here and what we've always done is we try to solve people's problems, right? I don't have a product I'm selling you. I'm trying to solve a problem for you. I'm coming up with a solution that makes your life better, fixes this particular issue that you have. And to be able to provide that and sell that, you have to understand the problem, right? And what the remedy looks like. So, you can't be a successful salesman in this industry doing what we're doing unless you have a technical understanding. Or a lot of companies will take that salesman and then they will bring an engineer with them. So there's always two people that come around. And you ask a question, he gives you the sales answer, he gives you the technical answer. Found that the people that have a good, solid technical understanding can be better salesmen if they have the right personality. A lot of times engineers have that stereotype where they want to sit in the office, they want to work on their computer, they want to nerd out and don't necessarily want to go out and interface with customers and talk with them and from sales. So it's a unique blend of two different skill sets.
It is. And you do it very well. And yeah, you're definitely serving two people. And I know that it's been very good for you. Not mentioning any names, but I know who your clients are, and I know how much you've been working for them. So you must be doing something right. And I think that, again, that's just so cool and something that we need to explore in this industry.
Yeah. I have a question for you, if you don't mind. Something I'm nerding out about, I'd like to think that I'm going to be the expert in it, is the cybersecurity, the Coast Guard cybersecurity final rule. I'm curious. Again, I really want to pat myself on the back because I've been nerding out about it. I've got deep dives. I've been updating the members. I've been able to answer questions. I'm working on the technical stuff, like the training. I'm just curious, are you getting involved in that? Like from on your side, are y'all seeing like how's that going to be integrated with vessels and whatnot? Because it's a lot of necessary and very unnecessary stuff that's going to have to be integrated.
Yep. So we're getting involved to the extent that we need to. So we're very familiar with IEC 62443 and then ABS's requirements for E26, E27 for all new builds going forward. So what we're fortunate with is a lot of the actual hardware that's manufactured, right? So we're an integrator. We put together solutions. So, in our facility, we're not doing heavy industrial manufacturing. We are taking a component, we'll take a PLC here, we'll put it into an enclosure, we'll do the wiring, the programming, the interfacing, right? We're not manufacturing the PLC, right? So a lot of the people that manufacture the actual hardware components, right? We work with people who are getting those components certified to, IEC 62443, to the basic, cyber hygiene requirements, to where when we incorporate those into a system, we don't have the vulnerabilities. And then we can build the systems with, we'll say, clean hardware. And then, going from there, right? Obviously, there's, like you said, there's a lot of necessary, unnecessary requirements, right? A lot of that comes into the system architecture and design, the controls that you put in place in the software once you have the, say, the stable platform to build on.
Okay. Well, I'll definitely be reaching out to you with some questions as I keep going forward on this.
It is, like you said, and like both of you have said, there's necessary parts and there's unnecessary parts, but there is a risk profile here because all of these components not all of these components, but many of the components that you're talking about and the system that controls them is connected to the outside world. They are not, and even if it's not connected to the outside world, the references that it's pulling on can be spoofed. You can spoof a GPS satellite. As much as people think that can't be done, it can be done. It's been proven to be done.
Happens all too often.
So
I love when people spoof Aaron's emails and email me and ask for me to do something while he's sitting next to me, and I always respond. And they're like, "Thank you for doing that." I was like, "I'm on it right now."
Please don't engage the Chinese
I don't
hackers.
click links. I just respond to the email.
Well, and I think another thing that you said there, Aaron, that the marine industry has a big benefit that a lot of other industries don't, is when you said, not everything is connected, but a lot of them are. But ships floating hundreds of miles out in the ocean, right, have the benefit that they are not plugged into hardwired infrastructure 24/7 like an industrial plant, right? So a lot of we'll say the benefit of cybersecurity is physical security, is you have an air gap. Now, as we move forward in technology and data, getting all that data aggregated, connected to the internet, pushed off to a cloud to do analytics on it is becoming more and more common. But if you can control the access to the equipment, right, then you greatly minimize your cyber risk. Obviously, if you're pulling, GPS data from a GPS satellite, it can still be spoofed, other ways, and you still have physical cybersecurity concerns, right? Somebody brings in a jump drive that plugs into something, you get a virus on a computer, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different controls in place on, cleaning or whitelisting software that goes on computer to where everything's blocked except for the things that are allowed. There's different ways to do that, and then a lot of vendors lock down all ports, right? So even though you're getting maybe a commercial, Hewlett Packard PC that's marine ruggedized, you can't go, load up Windows and play games on it. You can't plug in jump drives and do whatever you want. All that's locked down. So that particular system is very limited to do a specific application and nothing else.
My favorite story on that, because it is, and look, there's industry history of even vessels going completely black ship, losing all power or control because of someone plugging in a jump drive. So, I've heard the absolutely lowest of low tech solutions was all the USB ports being filled with rubber cement. And hey, it's a solution. I'm not saying it's the right solution, but it is a solution. So, but, in that, as you are now in, the business development side, and, I think we've seen this in wind, is that people sometimes in the wind industry, I think they came in and they didn't necessarily understand how the U.S. marine industry has grown up, specifically the offshore industry. But it really is, our segment of the industry is relationship based. Talk about that and talk about how you've been able to build those relationships that then have provided, provide for what you're trying
Success,
to do.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's something that, a lot of people will look at we'll say an industry, let's say you're chasing a project, right? And everyone wants to say, oh, well, cost and technical solution and lead time, all that plays an important role in business development. But if you have 3 vendors and all their cost, all their lead time, all their technical solutions are equal, who gets the order? The people that they like, right? So it's human nature, right? And the industry's very small, right? The industry, takes a long time to build relationships and get to know people and work with them and earn their trust. Takes a lot less time to break that and lose it, right? But but once you earn that trust and you get there, right? There's companies that, go with vendors and they get start building ships this way, and then it builds into their entire logistics, their spares, and it's like, why would I ever change from this vendor? I've got 8, 10, 12, couple dozen ships with one vendor. Why would I change? Then now I got to manage different spares, different inventories, different relationships. And it makes a lot of sense for the end users, the shipyards, to work with people that they know, that they trust, that they know how to do business with, right, that take care of them. And I've found that the most success I've had in my career is just doing a good job solving those people's problems, right? Because industry, I think Ashley, you may have mentioned it earlier, where people move around the industry, but they always stay in the industry.
Yeah.
Right. So guy that's at this shipyard today might be in a different position, more influential position at a different shipyard tomorrow. So it's good that he remembers you from the last project where you helped him out, went above and beyond to solve his problem or meet his, schedule needs. I found, just taking care of people and doing what's right, and just having that mindset of, solving the customer's problems and doing the best for them. So done very well for me in my career.
I mean, you are definitely one of the most well-regarded, well-respected people and I'm not going to say the word salesman because I don't ever think of you like that. But you also utilize your AMSA membership really well. You come to our events, you sponsor our events, you bring your customers. You never. Comes very natural to you, just to in that field. But I'm thinking back on the first time we met you. I thought I would just bring that up when we were in Baltimore. Do you want to elaborate on that? Tell the listeners.
Yeah.
It was the first time I met Jeremy. It was for the IPF happy hour.
This wasn't the first time I met Jeremy.
No. It was the first time I met him.
This was, yeah. No,
and that's when I was like, I like this guy. We're going to be friends.
Yeah, I think I want to hear Jeremy tell this story because this is a great story.
Yep. So I think I know the one you're talking about, oddly enough. So me and a couple of my colleagues were at our booth at IPF, which is International Partnering Forum for Offshore Wind. We were at our booth, and Aaron come up and mentioned that he had talked with Steve Scalise's office, and they were voting on HR1, which is the House's #1 most important bill for that particular session. So we're going to be voting on it the next day in DC, and they had enough votes, and it was going to pass. So they wanted some people, from the industry, because the bill was titled Lowering Energy Cost Act. So I wanted people from the energy industry, and Steve Scalise's home state of Louisiana, and there was a lot of people in the offshore wind industry and the shipbuilding happened to be in Baltimore for this. That's where they were from, Louisiana, and from the industry. So asked if we want to go down to DC the next day, go down there, watch them vote on the bill live, and then meet afterwards and celebrate, drink champagne, do a photo op for the victories. Sure, sounds great. I've never done anything like that, so we'll go do that.
Sign me up.
Yep. So we met up the next morning with a little bit of a challenge with the bus that was supposed to be there taking us. So we ended up renting a bunch of Uber. SUVs, and a group of us went down. So we got there. We met with the staffer, got through the first round of security going into the Capitol buildings. Now we get there because we're not in the bus and Uber. Some of us had bags and stuff, so we ended up dropping them in the staffer's trunk of his car and leaving them. And then we go through security, get cleared there. Then we end up going into the Capitol a bit, and then we have to go through a next level of security, and that's when they take all your electronics, right? So no phones, no smartwatches, no nothing, right? Because we're actually going into the House chamber, right? The law, the rules don't allow any electronics. That's for members or guests. So I think the only thing that's allowed in there is C-SPAN's old antiquated camera to live stream it, right? And
it's awesome.
So you get rid of all that. We put all of our stuff, in little lockers, and then we go through securities. We're a whole group of the AMSA delegations upstairs looking down on the main floor of the House there. And it's full, in-person turnout to vote. So you've got, 430 odd, people or how many ever that were there that day, running around and wheeling and dealing and, talking and back and forth. And then they go through and they voted on HR1 and a bunch of other things. It passed. It's all good. So that was a very interesting experience. I'd never seen that. And then we leave out of there and we're walking back out of there. And I guess we're going on to our next portion of it. And so I'm walking there and I'm walking next to Joe Ogeron, who's Louisiana state congressman, and we're chatting and we walk and then we're just kind of walking with the crowd and we walk and we go into this room and we're walking and then I'm talking to Joe and then I kind of look up and next thing you know, Congresswoman Lauren Bobart's there and we're taking pictures and shaking hands and I'm like, I recognize a bunch of these people and kind of walking down saying hello to everyone and then I kind of get down there and I'm at the end and I kind of look. And then I look back and Joe and the people that I was with were kind of being ushered out of the room. And then the door closed and all the cameras are on and I'm on stage at what was Congressman
Kevin
Speaker of the House,
Speaker of
Kevin
the
McCarthy.
House, Kevin
Yeah,
McCarthy.
on his his after after the vote, then he had a live conference meeting there. And so I'm stood on stage there and seeing a lot of the pictures. There was a lot of memes afterward. I'm up there and I'm looking around like completely puzzled because I'm not supposed to be there, right? And I'm on stage and I'm stood behind. So Marjorie Taylor Greene was there. There was a couple of folks with hard hats on from industry, and I'm just there and I'm kind of looking and there's more cameras than you can ever imagine. There must have been 300 cameras. There were people kneeled down recording, people just above them, people stood up, an entire wall. And so you go and look, on Twitter and everywhere afterwards, and I'm in tons of photos and videos, background from 15 different angles, and I look very out of place. Right? Like I am
You really didn't. It's just that we knew, and that's what makes it funny.
Well,
I knew as well, which it wasn't funny at the time because this is in 2023, right? This is after the whole storming of the Capitol, January
Yeah.
6th, all that going on, and I'm like, oh great! As soon as I come out of here, I'm going to get arrested, right? Like I've
Yeah.
in somewhere I'm not supposed. So I've got all these thoughts running through my mind, and so we finish up. It was a 37-minute long ordeal,
oh
which
yeah,
was
it was
a
forever.
very, very long 37 minutes. So we finished that up, and then I was like, all right, we'll walk out of here. I guess I'll get arrested, and we'll figure out what happens next, right? And meanwhile, I still don't have my phone. I'm just, in some room inside the Capitol where I'm not supposed to be with, the
With
entire
Speaker of the House.
Republican side of the House, all of them there. And I'm like, all right, well, here we go. So walk out of there and then walk out and nothing happens. You just walk and everyone starts going their separate ways. It's like, okay,
All
maybe
right.
I'm going to get away with this, right? So I was like, what do I do now? I was like, hey, Mr. Scalise, we were going to drink champagne in the Lincoln. We didn't do that yet because he's been up there on stage with me the whole time. So I look up and I can see McCarthy and Scalise walking. So what do? Start stalking them.
Yeah.
So I kind of walking around, people speed walking. I get up there behind them and we walk out into like the main rotunda area of the Capitol. And, McCarthy is waving and, shaking hands, kissing babies, doing his, politician thing. And Scalise is, and McCarthy kind of veers off to the right. Scalise goes to the left and I kind of see us. Oh, there's, can kind of see the Lincoln Room over there. So walk up behind him. We walk in there and then there's a standing ovation. I see Aaron and all the rest of the folks are in there. I was like, hey, we're back. So then it was right on schedule. So I don't know what y'all did for the 37 minutes while we were on stage, but probably wasn't as entertaining.
I freaked out about causing and we won't talk about the first, but causing the second Capitol security problem that I caused that day. I was freaking out about that. And so what happened was, our group all went into Scalise's hideaway. It's not the Lincoln Room. I'm not going to call it that. And so we all follow in there. We're in there with Mr. Scalise's staff and some great friends. Claire Trokey's in there.
Shout out Claire.
Yes. All of a sudden I start, just doing a head count. I'm like, 1, 2, shoot, I'm missing somebody. And so I started counting again. I'm like, okay, who am I missing? I'm going through the roll like, oh, I'm missing Jeremy. So I go to Mr. staff member, Claire, was his legislative director, policy director at the time. I'm like, hey, I lost a number. I mean, she's like, what do you mean? That's like, There
She's
were
fabulous.
14. There's now 13. I lost a member. And so can I have an intern to walk me around because you can't be unescorted in the Capitol? And she's like, oh no, we're not delegating this to an intern.
That's
I'm
not
walking.
entirely true, Aaron. I'm just saying.
Well,
You're
you
not
weren't
supposed to
alone.
be. Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
with the member of Congress.
I was
Yeah.
escorted by lots of people.
Yeah.
So we go search and we try to find, and the last place we go is into the Rayburn room, which is ornate room right off the Capitol, and it's where Speaker McCarthy at the time was doing his press conference and looking around. And she's like, "Do you see him?" I'm like, "Yeah, I see him."
On
She's like,
stage.
"Well, let's go get him." I'm like, "Can't. He's on stage."
It really is
So
the best story ever. And then we'll flash a picture up for everyone of it too,
yeah,
because
we
we have a
will.
great picture.
I have a great picture of me taking a picture of Congressman Scalise when he came into his hideaway, and there's a raised platform, and he's up there and he's giving a speech, and then in the bottom corner you
She's
see
just walking.
Jeremy sheepishly walking in.
But the fact that they all shook your hands, it was like you belonged there. It goes to what I'm saying. Like you
Yeah,
just, you
people
pull it
think
off so
people
well,
think
Jeremy.
Forrest Gump is like so unbelievable. It's not. You Forrest Gumped your way into a Speaker of the House
Yeah.
press conference.
It's funny that, Ashley, that's your first time meeting him, because the first time I met Jeremy, he told me that story and showed me the pictures.
Because it was literally the best story ever. Well, I was having a panic attack because the buses canceled last minute, and then nobody was answering the phones. And then I'm trying to get Uber Blacks for everyone. And it was the night after our happy hour, so everyone's hungover. It was just a lot going on. And then Aaron is texting me that I've lost someone. I'm like, well, I can't do anything. I'm in Baltimore.
It was, but it ended up all working out. We had a great trip, a great experience.
And you've come to Washington, D.C. every time since then.
I have.
Yeah, it's great, and it is a great trip. Yeah, I think we haven't gotten you anywhere, we haven't caused any other security problems in your other 2 trips to DC that at least that I've been made aware.
I cause security problems. I know this is going to be a shocker all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Legit.
Yep.
I
Yes.
can't help myself.
Yeah. Much like the time you announced in an airport to the
I was with
the
Ike
chairman of
Skelton.
the Armed Services Committee that you just traveled with mace on an
Yeah.
airplane.
I
Thank
held
you.
the mace. I was like, look, I brought mace. And he was like, could you put that down, ma'am? That was after I tried to set him up with my grandmother.
That all did happen. But I do think while that is a funny and hilarious story, I do think it speaks to how you have built relationships in this industry, and that you have seen that, hey, it's not just going down to the Capitol as a cool thing to do and a good time. It's also that, we on that trip, I remember there were some pretty, again, not going to call out any other suspects, but, that there were some good high level people there. And you recognize a lot better than some people, I would say, that there are relationship building opportunities out there. And
Absolutely.
that's important.
Now, that's something I wish there was OMSAs in other segments or other markets where, and I tell people all the time, if you're trying to get into offshore, OMSA's the place to be. You can go pay an annual membership and buy so much exposure. You can't do that in most markets, right?
Yeah.
And OMSA has built a great organization that gives you the exposure to all those people, right? And then you're doing something that supports what's of value to them, right? And it's very unique. I've not found it in any other industry.
Well, applause to you for realizing that, but it is something that we do pride ourselves on, that, we're here for lobbying. We're here to be a spokesman for the industry. We're here to do, the cybersecurity regulation stuff that Ashley's working on right now, the DP stuff Angelle's working on. And all of that is fundamentally important, just absolutely bedrock level importance for us. But that's not our only role. And,
Yeah.
there's that third leg of the stool there with the networking, because again, we're in a relationship based industry. You're either on the outside looking in or the inside looking out.
And actually, most of everything we do, even or at least me, I put that in the forefront of, yes, we need meetings. Yes, I need to give you all the regulatory information, but how do I make it so that I can get everyone there in the room to not only be able to network, but also talk about what's going on? Because that's also something that we have that I feel like other segments don't have is you have everyone talking about it. You have the owners, operators, the captains, you have the technical people like yourself, all trying to fix the problems together, which usually isn't the case, right? You usually have one side fighting the other side. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah, no, I agree. But kind of going back to the beginning of your career, and again, I'll get on my soapbox about we got to stop getting lucky on getting great people like yourself into our industry. How, from your perspective, having lived this, how do we get the next Jeremy Bailey into our industry? Because I'm sure there is that person that's out there that is, you claim to have not taken apart your parents' television. I'm still not going to believe that. But how do we get that next person that has that aptitude? Because there's a lot of other industries looking for that person, right?
Hmm.
How do we make sure they come to our side?
Yep. That's a good question. I think it starts with exposure, right? So when I came to the marine industry, I didn't come to the marine industry because the marine industry was anything great or amazing that I knew about. I came because where I was at wasn't quite cutting and seemed like it'd be a better jump. I said, but that's not how I would draw people to the industry, right? If you look at what happens on a ship, right? You have a floating city, right? You have the power plant, you have all the transmission distribution lines, you have all the equipment they use, you have some really cool technology. You look at all the automation, the controls, you look at what's happening with dynamic positioning and how neat of a process that is, right? To get the technical people excited about it and show them what's going on there, right? A lot of people have no idea what's on a ship. They think, oh, it's just a big chunk of steel that floats out there in the water. That's not, right? There is more technology in a ship than in a refinery, in a chemical plant, in a power plant, because
Yeah.
it's all of those together. You have the entire, life cycle of electricity from generation to end consumer, all the process controls, all the equipment, anything you could ever want to touch, all in one little small, area that you get to work on. And that's something that is a challenge because most people, have expertise in one or two of those little areas. They don't have the full cycle expertise unless they've been in marine, but it's also an opportunity, right? If you've got some, we'll say younger engineers that are looking to go do really, really cool things, right? Marine's got it, right? If you've got maybe say a middle of the career engineer that's working somewhere else that's kind of getting burnt out, it's getting boring. Marine's not, right? Marine is anything but boring, right? It's exciting every day, right? There's always loads of challenges and problems to solve. It's never boring. Not when you look at the amount of technology, the interfaces. I think the key there is getting the people excited about it, right? I think if you go look at job descriptions today, and this is something I brought up a good bit at GE was we write a job description that says you must be able to do this, you must be able to work long hours in hot, dirty shipyards and lift up to this much. You look at it and you say, why would I ever sign up for this? Right? It
Yeah.
doesn't look
Right.
like so, but they don't go in and write like all the cool things that you get to do and then what those cool things enable. Right? If you look at what a drill ship does, what a supply boat, what a subsea construction vessel does, right? It's impressive and it makes a real impact, right? A lot of people think you go to the gas
Yeah.
station and the gas comes from the gas station. No, the gas station is just the place that processes
Yeah.
your payment and puts it into your vehicle. Right? It starts its journey, thousands of miles below the Earth's surface, today, thousands of miles below water to get to the Earth's
Yeah.
surface.
Yeah.
And and the marine industry is, I won't even say it's an enabler. It's the entire, life cycle process to locate it, to drill for it, to pump it, to transport it into the refineries on shore, to turn it into gas or diesel or other petroleum products. And most people have no idea that even exists. And they just, kind of either they've not thought about it or they just don't know that, hey, it doesn't come from the gas station. Or it doesn't come from the refinery.
That is so true. And one of the reasons that we started this podcast was to help tell these stories and not even tell these stories to potential applicants, but tell these stories to ourselves to be like, hey, we have to do a better job of this. Let's make sure we're doing that. And the tip on the job description is a great
Yes,
one.
I
Yeah.
wrote that down. And I also
Uh,
wrote it starts with exposure because that's exactly exactly what we've been trying to say. But you
yeah.
said it.
And again, we have people that we've seen it with other guests that are very adjacent to our industry. You've grown up in the Gulf Coast, and you're, I didn't even think about that. How not? Like, we got to be better about this, guys.
Yeah, and I think it's key for Marine, right now because there's a very positive push for Marine right now with
Yes.
the current
Yes.
administration, a lot of what's going on. But there's been such a, we'll say, relaxed environment there. Say that the skilled workforce isn't there, right? The technical workforce isn't there, right? You look, a lot of shipyards are partnering with other shipyards because they can't, each one of them can't get all the people they need to do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that's only going to get worse as we see other industries that are taking off. Data centers right now, the amount of construction effort in data centers is going to
Yeah.
pull a lot of talent. And
Right.
I think the challenge there is they have way more money, right? And I think the
Mhm.
only thing that's likely to keep people in other industries is the enjoyment of the work, right? Data centers are big, dumb, boring, just a warehouse full of the same thing, and you do it over and over and over again. Right.
Yeah.
So from the construction side, it's not as exciting, right? What the end use is great, right? And there's a lot of
Yeah.
excitement around that. But the process of building it is just a large scale of boring, monotonous.
Well, and again, that's why I was so grateful that you came on our show this week to talk about this and to show that, it's this great opportunity, not just for that mariner or anyone like that, but for yourself, the person that is, electrically inclined, technologically inclined, has a good engineering mind, and, that doesn't just want to have a monotonous job. And I think you're right. Also, I think in our industry, we are small enough that there's always a path to growth. And we kind of
Mhm.
have a path to growth culture with us that was ingrained from the hosepipe culture, that if you're in our industry and you're doing a good job, you're going to go places.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's something, you talk to the size of the industry, and you look at the offshore industry is a very small culture, but when you look at the companies, they're not huge corporations. They're small family-owned businesses,
Hmm.
right? Most
Yeah.
of them have the family name in the company name, right? And you look at that, and these are very close-knit companies, and you look at the same time, though, in the family business, you look at the top of these businesses. That's not just the people with the family name, right? And you
Yeah.
look throughout the organization, there's people with the family name that are further down the organization. There's people without the name that they're higher up. And it shows that it's not just, oh, well, if you're in the family,
Right.
you get the executive role. Well, no, this guy's better, at the job or
Yeah.
more suited, so he's got it and he's worked his way up. And I think that's awesome because there's less of that in the corporate world, right? I think there's a lot more in the
Right.
corporate world of that kind of buddy mentality, or it's not what you do, it's who you know, and moving up, right? Whereas seeing the smaller businesses, there is a lot more reward for what you do and the value that you add.
Those are great points. I think we have taken a ton of your time here. So, I just want to go around the screen here and see if anyone has any final points that they want to have or a final question. Angelle or Ashley, what final points do you want to make or final questions?
Well, my final points are just I appreciate you taking the time and talking. We'll have to have you on again so you can talk about your daughter, who is the most adorable thing alive, and
Yes.
about all y'all's hustling. I am just jealous of it as a hustler myself, all the businesses. But I really do appreciate you explaining um, your side of the industry and how to get people excited and what we could do, AMSA could do to help give that exposure. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that perspective.
So my last question, trying to think if it's two or one. So I'll just do one. But my one for, can you give advice? Like, what's your best advice for the people that you say are more technical in this more networky kind of industry?
That's a great question. Good job. Thank you.
Yep. So I think there is being technical is great, right? But I think as technology grows and society becomes more dependent on it, technologically minded people are becoming less unique, right? So there's becoming a lot more of those, right? If you look at the amount of people that go to in a 4-year university today versus 20 years ago or 50 years ago, right? 50 years ago, going to a university was very few and far between. Now everyone thinks you finish high school and you have to go to university, right? So those technologically minded people are becoming a lot more common. So I think, that's great. And, being technologically minded is great, but you have to do something to set yourself apart, right? So you have to be able to build those networking skills, those personal skills, kind of get out of your comfort zone, right? Because at the end of the day, right, there's a lot of really good ideas that never see the light of day because somebody couldn't put together the business case or go sell that idea. So the technical bit's not enough, and I think as the world matures more and more, I think that those human skills are going to become even more more valuable, right? You look at AI, where it's teaching everyone you can sit back and have AI do everything. You don't need to talk to people, don't need to do anything. That the relationships and the actual networking is going to become even more valuable.
That's
I
a
agree.
very good question and a great answer to that. So I
Yeah,
really
thank
love
you,
that.
Jeremy.
Jeremy, what final points do you have for us?
Nope. I just want to thank y'all for letting me come on here and talk a little bit about myself and tell some stories with you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate everything that the OMS has done, to help me. Right. I mean, OMS has opened a lot of doors. I've been able to meet a lot of people through OMS's events, and have a great time doing it. So I really appreciate what y'all do. And I'll say if there's anything that me or my company can do to help any of your listeners, right, reach out to us. Right, you can go to SPOC. We have 3 different companies, right? So SPOCgrid.com or SPOCautomation.com or SPOCSCADA.com. Reach out or get in touch with me directly, and we love to help people solve their complex problems.
Well, you do a great job at it, and your calendar certainly shows how in demand you are. So
Yes.
that's a good thing. But appreciate your support and engagement in AMSA, and you're one of the people that make this organizations and make this industry. So thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to have you. If you're in this industry, in this market, please go check out the SPOC websites, because it's a great company and it's a great AMSA member. So love having y'all. So with that, that has been another episode of Maritime in America, and I just want to sign off. Thank you again, Jeremy. Thank you to my co-host. It's been great having everybody. Everyone, take care and be safe.
That wraps up another episode of Maritime in America. We're proud to highlight the voices and stories that keep the American offshore industry strong. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us, and remember, the course ahead is shaped by those who step up and steer it. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your crew. Tune in every Friday for your offshore briefing, and don't miss our next full episode, dropping soon with a very special guest, Mariner's Perspective. Catch you next time.